Outside a restaurant, among passers-by and flower vendors, a skinny little girl stood watching in silence. Her hair was tied into two messy braids, her t-shirt was stained with dirt, and one of her sandals slipped off her heel. But what drew the most attention were her eyes, large, dark, and hungry, and in the heart of Coyoacán, between colorful streets filled with history, the smell of fresh tortillas mixed with the buzz of late afternoon. It was just another ordinary day in Mexico City, but on that bustling corner, something extraordinary was about to happen. The restaurant, Sabores de mi Tierra, bustled with hurried servers, waiters balancing trays, and customers competing for tables with a view of the square. Liz was only 8 years old, but in her tiny body, she carried the weight of someone who already knew what real hunger felt like. And it wasn't just hunger for food. It was the hunger of being seen, of having someone look into her eyes and truly notice her. It was the longing to hear her name spoken with affection, to have a place where she could simply exist. As the waiters served steaming plates of tacos al pastor, rice with black beans and guacamole, her stomach growled like a drum. She watched a family laughing around a table, their joy wrapped in the sound of traditional music playing in the background. Then, without thinking too much, driven more by courage than shame, Liz stepped through the restaurant's entrance. Her small frame seemed even smaller in the spacious dining hall. Conversations slowly quieted. Suspicious glances turned toward her. A woman muttered, "How awful," clutching her purse. A man frowned with disapproval. But Liz kept her head high and walked to the counter, where a surprised waiter nearly dropped the glass he was holding. "Sir, may I wash the dishes for leftovers?" she asked, her voice firm but gentle, as if she knew she had little to lose. The silence was instant. Even the music seemed to fade. Some people laughed in disbelief. Others exchanged uneasy glances. It was as if the girl had broken an invisible barrier, the one that separates those with a reserved table from those who are never invited to sit. Then Alejandro, the restaurant's owner, appeared from the kitchen. He wore a stained apron and held a wooden spoon, a middle-aged man with a serious face and a stern expression, but eyes that had seen too much. He stood beside the girl and looked around, challenging the judgment of the entire room. "Serve her the same dish from table 5, he ordered firmly. A murmur swept through the restaurant. Table 5 had ordered the most complete dish on the menu: handmade tacos, Mexican rice, seasoned black beans, fresh guacamole, and a chilled hibiscus water. It was a generous meal, fit for celebration. And now it would be served to a girl with no money, no reservation, no right. Liz didn't understand at first. She blinked, confused. "For me?" she whispered. Alejandro simply nodded and returned to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. But in that moment, something had changed. Not just for Liz. The air felt different. Laughter returned, but now more subdued. Some customers looked away, ashamed. Others seemed moved. And Liz, with a new sparkle in her eyes, sat down like a queen claiming her throne. The girl who had come to ask for scraps now ate slowly, reverently, as if each bite were a piece of hope. Without knowing it, she had begun a story that would change not only her life, but also the life of the man who had truly seen her. The restaurant carried on, trying to erase the impact of what had just happened. But it was impossible. Alejandro, the owner, returned to the kitchen without speaking to anyone, only staring into the steam rising from the pots. His face held its usual sternness, but inside, something old had been stirred. As the staff whispered in corners, he gave precise orders. "More onions on those tacos. The rice needs salt. Bring the dish for table 5. Nothing escaped his seasoned eyes, not even the quiet gaze of the girl sitting alone, still surprised by the gesture she had received. Liz ate with the care of someone who knew the value of every grain. She didn't devour the food or rush through it. She simply savored it. Every bite was chewed attentively, as if she were memorizing flavors she'd never tasted before. From time to time, her eyes wandered around the room, maybe wondering if all of it was real. Customers still watched her. some with suspicion, others with curiosity. But she didn't hide. The plate in front of her wasn't charity. It was dignified, generous, served with respect. Alejandro knew the weight of that choice. It would have been easier to ignore her, more convenient to pretend he hadn't seen. Most restaurant owners wouldn't have even let her through the door, but he wasn't like most. He had known hunger. He had known rejection. He had begged for leftovers and been chased away like an animal. And that's why he decided the girl deserved the best dish in the house. Not to impress anyone, not to be admired, but because it was the right thing to do. As the kitchen pulsed with the scent of lunch, Alejandro watched from afar. He saw the girl lift the hibiscus water to her lips with both hands. She was just a child, but there was something in her posture that echoed adults too marked by life. The way she sat up straight, the way she held back her joy, the way she didn't allow herself to trust easily. He recognized that guardedness. He had once been the same. When she finished her meal, Liz gently gathered the utensils, folded the napkin, and sat still, unsure whether she should stand up or wait. A waiter approached, and upon seeing the girl's gesture, almost apologized with his eyes. But she just smiled softly, grateful, and then stood with the same care she had shown when entering. Before leaving, she glanced discreetly toward the kitchen, as if searching for the man who had treated her with kindness. Alejandro pretended not to see. He just kept chopping onions with precision. But inside, something was warming. It wasn't fleeting compassion. It was memory. It was reflection. The image of the girl walking away down the street stayed in his mind like a painting hung in memory. The sound of customers filled the restaurant again. Pots bubbled, traditional music resumed, and the day went on. But something had been planted there. A silent yet powerful gesture that began to sprout in the hearts of two strangers connected by a similar story. Alejandro wasn't looking for applause. He didn't need approving glances. He did what he did because he knew dignity is not something to be denied, especially to those who need it most. That day, no one noticed, but an invisible bridge had been built. Between the bustling taqueria and a forgotten shack in some corner of the city. Between a weathered man and an invisible child. Between the past Alejandro tried to bury and the chance to rewrite someone's future. And perhaps his own. Night fell over Mexico City, blanketing it with honking horns, hurried footsteps, and headlights lighting up Coyoacan's wet cobblestones. Inside the restaurant, the lights went out one by one. Alejandro stayed behind for a few more minutes in silence, as he did every evening after closing the register and checking the inventory. But that night, there was something different in his gaze. A thought that refused to leave. The girl, Liz. The way she ate. Her restrained way of expressing gratitude. The brave question she asked when she walked into the restaurant. She had left behind more than just clean silverware. She left a trace, a restlessness. Alejandro, used to ignoring street misery for emotional survival, now felt moved by a rare impulse. In that moment, he grabbed his coat, locked the front door, and crossed the street with quiet steps. He walked down the sidewalk, like someone with no hurry, but with a silently mapped destination. He turned in the direction where the girl had gone. His seasoned eyes, trained by nights spent sleeping on the streets, knew how to spot clues. Footprints, bags, shortcuts. He walked through dimly lit streets, avoiding the bars and the noise. Crossed a plaza, descended an alleyway, and turned a corner, then stopped. There, in a vacant lot hidden between graffitied walls and piles of construction debris, stood a cluster of makeshift shelters made from tarps, wooden planks, and old roofing tiles. Alejandro stood still for a moment, watching in silence. A few candles flickered inside the shacks. Dogs barked in the distance, and among the muffled sounds of the city, he heard a dry cough. He followed the sound carefully. Through a gap between two cardboard walls, he saw Liz sitting beside a frail-looking woman wrapped in worn-out blankets. It was her mother, Teresa. The girl spoke softly, pointing to a drawing on a napkin she had saved from the restaurant. describing with excitement the meal she'd had: perfectly seasoned rice, warm tacos, beans unlike anything she'd tasted before. Teresa smiled between coughs. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale. Alejandro recognized the signs instantly: illness, hunger, abandonment. That woman had been sick for a long time, and still she tried to listen to her daughter as if the world still made sense. He stepped back slowly, without making a sound. Walked back the same way, heart heavy, silence as his companion. That night, he barely slept. His mind returned to that scene like a fire burning in memory. The next morning, before opening the restaurant, Alejandro stopped by the market. He quietly bought fruit, rice, eggs, bread, powdered milk, and 2 types of medicine, a simple antibiotic and a cough syrup. In a brown paper bag, he carefully packed everything and walked to the same vacant lot, where he left the bundle near the tarp entrance, clearly visible. He didn't knock, didn't call out. He just left it there and returned. The next day, he did the same. And again, the day after. Always before sunrise, he would walk there, leave food and medicine, then open the restaurant as if nothing had happened. He didn't want gratitude. He didn't want recognition. It was just his way of giving back for the gesture that once changed his life, when, as a boy, an unknown cook had offered him food and dignity, expecting nothing in return. And so, in silence, Alejandro began to water the first seed Liz had planted. An invisible gesture to the naked eye, but one that grew each day, among the rubble of the city and the ruins of the soul. Time passed, with the nearly imperceptible rhythm of silent transformations. Life in Coyoacan continued with its honking horns, street vendors and tourists captivated by the colorful homes and the scent of flowers on balconies. Alejandro kept to his routine, opening the restaurant early, managing the kitchen, inspecting the dishes, and before all that, discreetly delivering the brown bag to the foot of the shelter where Liz and Teresa lived. But something inside him began to yearn for more. It wasn't pity, it was memory. That constant reminder of his younger self, small, abandoned, staring at doors that never opened. And now, he was the one holding the keys. That's when Alejandro made a decision. He wrote a simple note, folded with care. "There's a table waiting for you. Come tomorrow at 1 p.m. He signed it with his name and, as always, left the note with the bag of food that morning. The next day, just before the scheduled time, he had a table prepared in the coziest corner of the restaurant. A clean tablecloth, shining utensils, 2 full plates with fresh fruit juice. It was an invitation, not to charity, but to dignity. When the clock struck 1 in the afternoon, Liz appeared holding her mother's hand. Teresa walked slowly, wearing a floral scarf to cover her unkempt hair. Her face carried a mix of shame and gratitude. Liz, on the other hand, walked with the boldness of someone who already knew the place. Alejandro welcomed them without words, just a nod of the head and a wave of his hand, pointing to the table. They sat down. They ate. Teresa quietly shed tears at the first spoonful. Liz said little but smiled with her eyes. Alejandro sat at the next table, not wanting to intrude but wanting to be present. After a few minutes, he stood and approached them. "My name is Alejandro," he said in a calm voice. "When I was 6 years old, I was left at the bus station in Puebla with a bag of clothes and a piece of paper with my name on it. I went hungry. I stole bread. I slept on the street. Until one day, a cook, who didn't even know my name, gave me hot food and taught me how to wash dishes. I never forgot him. He was the first to look me in the eyes and see me as a human being." Teresa listened in silence. Liz, with her elbows on the table, kept her eyes fixed on Alejandro's face. There was something unspoken between them, a connection built not through words, but through broken stories that recognized each other. "I can't change your past," Alejandro continued, "but I can help with the present. Teresa, if you want it, there's a place for you in the kitchen. And Liz, if you accept, There's already a spot for you at the public school here in the neighborhood, and a brand new backpack waiting for you." Teresa hesitated. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she squeezed her daughter's hand. She didn't say yes right away, but she didn't say no either. Alejandro simply nodded and went back to work, as if he had made a routine business offer. But what he offered was so much more. It was a new beginning. At the end of that lunch, as Liz licked her fingers after the last bite of cinnamon dulce de leche, Teresa stood up and walked over to Alejandro. "Can I start tomorrow?" she asked, her voice hoarse but steady. He replied only with a brief nod and a small smile. The table was no longer empty. It was set, and for the first time in a long while, ready for 2 new beginnings. Teresa arrived at the restaurant the next morning with a tight heart, carrying a mix of anxiety and hope that overflowed in her tired eyes. The apron she wore was old and stained, but to her it represented something new, a chance to rebuild. At first, everything felt strange and distant. The strong smell of spices, the clatter of utensils, the fast pace of the kitchen. Her hands trembled as she picked up the knife to chop vegetables, and more than once, she nearly dropped the plate Alejandro had trusted her to prepare. Liz watched her mother's every move from a distance, sitting on a bench near the entrance, clutching her new backpack tightly, still smelling of paper and plastic. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of pride and admiration. For the first time, she felt she could dream, that this simple routine could become the foundation for something greater. In the quiet of the restaurant, she drew, sketching the layout of the dining room, the tables, and the people who were already starting to become part of her story. The first few days were challenging. Teresa stumbled over her words, confused by the names of ingredients and the rush of kitchen orders. Alejandro observed everything in silence, not to criticize, but to support. Instead of harsh remarks, he offered small lessons. How to pick the best cilantro leaves, the perfect texture for the beans, the importance of smiling at customers. Little by little, the woman who once couldn't hold eye contact began to gain confidence. Her posture straightened, her voice grew stronger. Liz, in turn, adapted to the neighborhood's public school. She carried her backpack full of new supplies, sat in the front rows, and paid close attention to every word the teacher said, eager to learn all she could. The school routine was a world entirely different from the one she had known until then. Painted walls, the buzz of voices, the warmth of classmates. And there, among notebooks and pencils, she began to plant a new seed of hope for her future. At the restaurant, the change was noticeable not only to Alejandro, but to the entire team. Teresa's arrival brought a new rhythm, a different kind of energy. The staff began treating the mother and daughter with more kindness. Smiles became more frequent, words more gentle. Alejandro implemented a few changes: fair breaks for rest, short training courses to improve employee skills, and team meetings to hear suggestions. Sabores de mi Tierra was no longer just a place of work. It was becoming a refuge, a space where dignity and respect were valued. Teresa's mornings became filled with shy laughter and constant learning. That environment, which had once seemed unreachable, was now the stage of her transformation. The kitchen became her school, the customers her indirect teachers, and Alejandro, a silent mentor who never stopped believing. The woman who had arrived frail, insecure, and sick was slowly finding the strength not just to care for her daughter, but to believe in herself again. Liz was living proof of this rebirth. With every school report, she showed better grades, made new friends, and even started dreaming big. At night, she would sit beside her mother and share everything she had learned, while Teresa listened with pride and quiet tears in her eyes. In the little shack, now cleaner thanks to Alejandro's help, hope was beginning to creep into every corner, lighting up what once seemed dark and hopeless. Alejandro, though quiet, followed everything closely. He watched Teresa gain confidence, Liz grow in knowledge, and the restaurant transform into a place of second chances. With every plate served and every smile shared, he knew a silent revolution was underway. He didn't need spotlights or applause. It was enough to see dignity blossom on faces once marked by pain. In that simple space, among tacos and the scent of spices, a family was beginning to rebuild. A mother rediscovering her worth, a daughter finding wings to fly, and a man who, through quiet gestures, was rescuing stories the world had tried to forget. The rebirth wasn't just theirs. It belonged to everyone who believed that even in the smallest of actions, a light can be born that transforms lives. The days began to unfold with a new, serene rhythm inside Sabores de mi Tierra. Teresa was no longer the shy and insecure woman who had walked in on the first day, carrying fear and doubt. Her timid smile had opened up, shaped by the daily routine that slowly made her feel part of something greater. She learned the names of the regulars, knew exactly how to prepare the beans for the gentleman at table 4, and even began anticipating orders, earning the team's trust. Her posture changed. She now stood tall, spoke with confidence, and even shared jokes with her fellow cooks. Liz, in turn, became a constant presence at the local school, where the teachers already knew her by name. She woke up early, packed her backpack with the care of someone who knew education was the gateway to a different world. Her notebooks filled with numbers, letters, and drawings. Lots of drawings. The little girl who once scribbled just to pass the time now used paper to express her dreams and hopes. She drew the restaurant, the people she had met, and especially her mother working happily, an image that grew more vivid with time. Inside the restaurant, Alejandro didn't just observe the transformation with attentive eyes. He took action to ensure that space became more than just a business. He established fair time off for all employees, understanding that rest and respect were just as important as the quality of the dishes. He organized small training sessions to improve the team's skills, inviting professionals to teach everything from culinary techniques to empathetic customer service. It was a deep cultural shift, quiet but real, and it was starting to bear fruit. The workplace became lighter, co-workers supported one another, and customers could sense something different in the air. The restaurant stopped being just a taqueria. It became a symbol of second chances, a space where respect was cultivated and dignity restored. Teresa found a new family among her co-workers, a support system she hadn't known she needed. The conversations during breaks, the shared laughter, the exchanged advice, all of it strengthened not only her work, but also her self-esteem. Liz, despite her young age, could feel this welcoming atmosphere, which made her shine with confidence and joy. Every morning, Alejandro walked to the restaurant knowing something bigger was happening. He watched Teresa smile while preparing meals, saw Liz with her new backpack at school, and felt that the cycle of pain and abandonment he once knew so well was beginning to break, right there, in that vibrant neighborhood of Mexico City. Sabores de mi Tierra had become more than just a restaurant. It was a meeting place for those seeking new beginnings, living proof that dignity can't be bought. It must be offered. Alejandro knew that his mission wasn't just to feed bodies, but also to nourish souls. The taqueria had become a place where hope, respect, and humanity were cultivated. Liz kept drawing, now with bolder lines and bright colors, reflecting the new light that shone in her life. Each figure was a story, each line a symbol of the strength growing inside her and her mother. Meanwhile, Teresa found motivation in the rhythm of her work and her daughter's school progress to keep fighting, even in the face of the difficulties that still remained. Alejandro, even without grand words, showed everyone that true transformation happens in everyday life, in small actions, in the patience of those who believe in the power of change. The restaurant was the stage where this silent revolution unfolded, a story told through tacos, glances, and gestures. And so, life went on. Between aromas, flavors, and renewed smiles, a different future began to take shape. And in that corner of Mexico City, hope was no longer just a distant dream. It was becoming a possible routine, built on respect, learning, and shared love. Liz had found a new way to express everything that words still couldn't capture. Sitting in a quiet corner of the restaurant with her colored pencils, she drew what she saw and felt. That day, the paper showed 3 figures holding hands. A woman with a serene face, a smiling girl, and a man in an apron who looked strong, yet kind. It was a simple image, but it carried the depth of an entire story. Hers, her mother's, and Alejandro's, who was slowly becoming part of that unlikely family. Alejandro, upon finding the forgotten drawing on a table, felt the weight of that image. He kept it with care, almost like a rare treasure. To him, it was more than just lines and colors. It was a silent symbol of what was happening at Sabores de mi Tierra. It was the portrait of dignity reborn, of hope spreading without fanfare. The next day, before the usual bustle began, Alejandro made a decision that reflected this transformation. Instead of a simple message, he set up a small shelf right at the entrance of the restaurant. Texto Padrón. On it, he placed fresh bread, fruit, and containers of prepared food, all neatly wrapped. Alongside it, a handwritten note read, "If you're hungry, take what you need. No one will judge you here." It was a quiet yet powerful gesture. The shelf wasn't just for Liz or Teresa. It was for all those, like them, facing invisible hardships in a fast-moving world. It was an invitation to the community, a quiet space of compassion, breaking through the walls of shame and exclusion. The restaurant staff observed the initiative with surprise and respect. Some even began leaving donations themselves, small, spontaneous acts of solidarity. The environment shifted once more, gaining an aura of humanity that didn't need an announcement to be felt. Liz, upon discovering the shelf, was moved. In the simplicity of that act, she understood that the restaurant was much more than a place to eat. It was a refuge, a place where respect and empathy weren't just words, but tangible actions. For the first time, she felt that it truly belonged to her mother, and to anyone in need. The drawing she had made days earlier became a daily reminder for Alejandro, a reminder that the real work was in nurturing that invisible network of care and dignity which extended far beyond the restaurant's walls, reaching streets, homes, and hearts. The shelf full of food and the kind note were small acts that carried a powerful message. No one should go hungry or be judged for it. It was a seed of compassion sprouting in Coyoacán, quietly transforming lives, with nothing but the strength of kindness. And so, without big speeches or spotlights, Sabores de mi Tierra solidified itself as a beacon amid the city's struggles, a place where silence held stories of resilience, where dignity was the main ingredient, and where hope grew with every simple, meaningful gesture. On a cold, rainy night, the streets of Coyoacán became wet mirrors, reflecting the flickering streetlights and the hurried steps of a few pedestrians. Alejandro was locking up the restaurant after another long day, when his eyes caught sight of a small figure, hunched under a soaked hoodie, standing on the edge of the sidewalk. A boy, not much older than Liz when he first met her, with empty eyes and the same lost expression he had once seen in the girl. Without saying a word, Alejandro returned to the kitchen, prepared a simple bag with bread, fruit, and a bottle of water. He stepped outside calmly, as if he already knew what to do. He approached the boy and, with a quiet gesture, placed the bag at his feet. The boy looked up, surprised, but didn't say anything. He simply picked up the bag and walked away slowly, disappearing into the shadows of the alley. Liz, watching everything from the restaurant window, whispered softly, "He has the same look I used to have." Alejandro simply nodded, aware that it was beginning all over again. The cycle that seemed to have ended with Teresa and Liz was now restarting. But something was different this time. Now he knew what to do, how to act with silence and humanity. As the boy vanished into the night, Alejandro felt a renewed sense of responsibility in his chest. It wasn't just an isolated act. It was a mission. A recognition that pain, hunger, and abandonment might never fully end. But a chain of solidarity could help ease the suffering. Liz, now more confident and mature, looked toward the future with certainty. She was held up by that invisible network. And one day, she knew, it would be her turn to hand that bag to another child adrift. That night, the restaurant wasn't just a place for food. It was a lighthouse guiding lost paths, a hand extended without judgment, a space where the cycle of exclusion was being broken, one soul at a time. And so, quietly, Alejandro kept walking his path, knowing that each gesture, no matter how small, planted a seed of hope that would multiply, renewing the lives of those the world had tried to forget. Days after that quiet encounter on the rainy night, Liz entered the restaurant clutching a folded piece of paper. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of pride and shyness as she approached Alejandro. She handed him her report card, her grades highlighted all high, the result of effort and determination that once felt so out of reach. "Look, Alejandro, I did it," she said with a timid smile. "Someday I want to write a book about my story, my mom's, and yours too." Alejandro took the paper with steady hands, feeling the weight of those words that carried not only the past, but a future full of possibilities. Then he pulled an old, worn-out bookmark from his pocket, with a phrase engraved that felt made for that moment. "Those who look at you from the outside can't imagine what you carry inside." With a calm smile, he handed the bookmark to Liz, a symbol of strength and courage to carry on. She held that simple object like a talisman, a reminder that the real battles happen far from the public eye, deep inside the heart. On the restaurant's shelf, Alejandro replaced the old note with a new one that now read, "Here, no one needs permission to be treated with respect." It was more than a phrase. It was a declaration of principle, the very essence of what Sabores de mi Tierra had become. A place where dignity was the foundation, respect the rule, and every person, regardless of their story, could find a safe space. Those small gestures, the bookmark, the sign, the shelf of food, formed an invisible network that transformed not only lives, but hearts and communities. Alejandro knew the road ahead was still long, that many more stories needed to be welcomed, and that the fight for dignity never ends. But in that moment, he felt sure that something profound had been created. Liz, now more confident, looked to the future with dreams far beyond what she had once imagined. Teresa, stronger than ever, faced life with renewed hope, and Alejandro continued on, quiet and steady, doing what so many forget, seeing those the world insists on overlooking. In the silence of the restaurant, amid the aromas of food and the distant sounds of Mexico City streets, a transformation was underway, quiet yet powerful. And it was that transformation, that restored humanity, that gave everything its true meaning. Because in the end, it's not just about the food served, it's about the lives reclaimed, the dignity restored, and the hope renewed every single day through each simple, genuine act. So, what did you think of this heartwarming story? If you believe the world needs more gestures like Alejandro's, more of Liz's courage, and the respect every human deserves, you know what to do. Smash that like button, just like Liz's first bite, with care and love. And subscribe to our channel so you never miss a single chapter of these incredible lives we bring to you. Texto Padrón, come join this family, because here we don't just tell stories, we live them together with you. So let's spread this good energy, click, share, and help transform the world, one video at a time. See you next time.